So, for the next 40 or so minutes, we're going to talk about you and Graphflow and how you ended up on that place. And actually, I think starting with you would be the place I'd like to start, which is how did Robert Elliott get involved in technology? Where did you grow up? How did you end up being interested in doing this every day of your adult life? Where did it all start for you?
All right, do you want me to start with the, I grew up in the East Rand bit and move along?
It's a good place to start because it
is a good
explains
place.
who you are and where you came from.
I'm from the East Rand, ended up in Fontaine during my school years, a bit in Grahamstown, and studied at UCT. I was roped into business science, unfortunately, and I guess I started out in a very technical background. At school I did computer science. In fact, I kind of finished matric computer science when I was in standard 9, and I was very keen in the technical space. And for some reason, I got convinced at that point in my life that I should move into the business side of things and lose the technical side, because it seemed to be a cooler space to be. It seemed to be where people were recognized.
Okay, so the business, you started in the deeper tech, but moved to the business through influence of others. Was that the school system that influenced you?
I think perhaps the school system. I don't think computer science was certainly wasn't recognized, and I kind of broke the mold of being the guy who played rugby, but also did computer science, and there were probably 3 of us who did it. But I think so. There definitely was an issue with recognition, and then I think at university the focus, perhaps the information systems stream of business science, it did kind of keep a foot in both camps, and I think it would be great to see that evolve into more of a sort of entrepreneurship type stream, rather than a consultancy type stream, which is where I ended up. I ended up working in a consultant company for 6 years after leaving UCT, and I was very fortunate. I worked across Africa. I worked in 16 different countries in Africa. I moved to London. We opened an office in London for the consulting company. I then spent some time in the Middle East working for that same company, and this was all in the banking sector. So banking, technology-focused projects, but like large-scale back-end banking systems and strategic, planning and program management in that space.
So, jumping just back to your education for a bit, because it's kind of one of the areas that's interesting me at the moment as somebody who employs people, but also as somebody who has 4 kids, and looking at my oldest is 13, and so looking at the way in which we're encouraged and how we encourage people as they choose their education and as they choose their focus. Do you feel like the university years for you helped you to be ready for the following 6 years of work, or do you feel that it largely didn't have the impact that you would like it to? And if you would change anything about that sort of university period, kind of where would you see the changes needing to be made that would have helped?
Yeah, I think that the first part of that question is I don't feel that it was. I feel like the experience of the work that I did in the next 5 to 6 years, in a small way, I was perhaps prepared for that. But I think that's something that's kind of on-the-job training more than anything. I mean, the idea around at university helping people think logically and structure thoughts. That part of it was really important in terms of going to the next phase. But there's a lot of what we did that had absolutely no relevance to work as a consultant. Now, it perhaps gave me a bit more confidence than anything else. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about what I think needs to change in that space, which is I don't think anyone knows what they want to do, and maybe you do when you're 15 or 16. So I think being exposed to as much as you can at that point is really important. I think the university model now, the online education space is obviously, changing education across the board, primary to tertiary. And I think that in the future we're going to be, I've just finished a course, an MIT course online. I'm constantly on Khan Academy, doing courses in art, music, even on the credit crisis, some technical stuff. And I think that that's where we're moving to. We're moving to kind of an evolved, continuous learning phase. And I think it's important to be recently heard this concept of a leading learner rather than anyone who's ever totally educated.
Yeah, I think that one of the trickiest things to not quash, is that the right word, in a child or in a young adult is that enjoyment of learning. And what I've seen with my own kids, for example, is there's areas where I can just see that when they involved in that, there's a hunger, and then there's other areas where it's like it's just I have to just tick the box and then I'll move on. And like you say with I've been on some of the stuff on the Khan Academy, etc. It's just fascinating. But as an adult, to know that you can pick and choose rather than be forced into a certain way. Like I go on there personally because I want to learn about something, and I'll find it and I'll learn it. I was learning about the future value of cash the other day, which is just as a concept. I don't think they would have taught me that in university, but like I can go and hunt it on.
Yeah, that is actually one of the things that they teach you at university.
Oh, okay. There you go. See, I didn't go to university.
No, I'm just. But and that actually coming back to the story, which is that played a huge role in my change, because I ended up spending 67 years, if you include a bit of travel, outside of the hands-on tech space. And I kind of, through a moment of change in myself and realizing what it was that I wanted to do and what I wanted to focus on, took the time out, took 2 or 3 years to kind of retrain myself to get back into programming, back into a bit of design. And I did. I took the first, Code School or Code Academy online courses, pick up some of the new languages that were available, and that was while I had another job, and so I kind of spent the evenings doing that and weekends and doing little projects, and I was in the space just before that, being really, really frustrated that I was always relying on other people to build things for me, and that I couldn't prototype. I could just come up with ideas. So I actively went about changing that.
So you're like a bit of a boomerang in the sense that you moved away, and then you kind of ran them in parallel and came back to that ability to convert the concept and the idea into something that was tangible.
Yeah, and not, there's a large part of the most part of Graphflow that I'm not responsible for building, but when you're a company of 2 people, I am involved in day-to-day, building and developing part of the application.
You can't just, you do all the work and I'll sit here and do sales. Cool. Well, that brings us nicely to, so for you, was it the 6 years and the side work and then Graphflow, or is there something in between before we?
Yeah, it was actually, I did a bit of, I worked as a consultant in Cape Town, and I started out working 5 days a week as a consultant. That became 4 days a week, where I could focus 1 day a week on a mixture of retraining myself, so focusing on building out little projects, and starting to build little business cases around business ideas that we had. And then that went from 5 progressively all the way to 1 day a week. So it wasn't I didn't overnight just quit my job and try and build a business. I took some time, and then when we were ready, we jumped in full time into that.
So I think that's a common thread that I see repeated, is that especially in the South African context, there isn't that ability to walk up to somebody with a concept and an idea and say, give me money, and I'll execute on it. I'm going to start day one. I'm fully committed, full time, etc. That's a repeated story, as I need to find a way to get this into my life before it can rocket. How, from a practical perspective, did you feel like you needed to work sort of 1.5 times or your capacity, or did you?
Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk has a great line. I think he says, if you want to start a business, there are plenty of hours between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning, and that's exactly how it works. And it's actually not a bad practice, because once you're full time and starting a business, you're working those hours anyway.
Just to get to do both.
So you may as well do it. You may as well do it while you have a job. But there is plenty of time and opportunity to do this. And I think that I was very fortunate in a way to take some time to transition, and then to have some backing to kind of get started. But I think it's important. It's important to have the kind of MVP product. So that you can actually kind of test that product market fit, even if it's in a very, very small way, before diving in and bringing investors on board and that sort of thing.
So switching gears to talk specifically about Graphflow, do you want to describe what you thought you were going to build and what you've actually ended up building? Because often they're very different things, and I expect for you it potentially was. When you started, what did you think you were going to build? What was your MVP? What was the kind of thesis that you had that you wanted to check?
So we started out, and actually, if there's time, I'll tell a little story about maybe a little bit about why we started out and kind of my passion behind it.
Start with the story where you want to start the story.
And then I'll answer that question. But I don't know if you've heard of a chap by the name of Matthew Fontaine Maury. I don't know if anyone, Matthew Fontaine Maury? Okay, no.
He's a hidden gem, obviously.
All right. So Matthew Fontaine Maury was a midshipman in the US Naval Forces in around 1820s, 1830s.
That might be why we haven't heard of him.
That's probably why you haven't heard of him. Yeah. And this guy, he was in an accident on the way to the ship one day, and he was really badly hurt and wasn't able to kind of act as a sailor or anymore. So he was placed, rather fortunately, into a mapping division of the US Navy because he couldn't walk anymore. And it actually ended up being quite fortuitous because he was very well suited to this new task he was given. And he started to question and interview sailors and seamen as to why they would take so long and such random and arbitrary routes across the Atlantic Ocean from Europe to the US. And at that point, it used to take them about 3 to 4 months to cross from mainland Europe to the US. And it turned out that the only reason that they were doing that was because they had previously been successful in that route that they were taking, and they had survived. Those were the two criteria. So he started unpacking this. He started exploring. He started interviewing all these captains around the world. But he started doing something else. He started taking the logbooks from the past few hundred years and actually started to dissect the conditions, the currents, the failures, etc. in those. And he created a map, and he broke the Atlantic into 5 degrees of separation, north, south, east, west. And he started to come up with kind of a weather model per month for each of these little blocks. And he made huge progress. But he decided that it wasn't enough, and that he needed some other way of improving the model that he was currently working on. So he created what I feel is like the first social network and crowd-sourced business in the world in the 1820s.
Crowdsourced sailor book.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty ingenious. I mean, it took a hell of a lot longer than it would today, and so it took a couple of years. But firstly, he reformatted the logbooks so that they were capturing the right data at the right times. But then he did something quite ingenious. He got all the ships, and it didn't matter if they were fighting against each other. It was really about sharing information. He got them to every day to write down their position as best as they could determine it, the conditions that they were currently faced with, put those little notes in a bottle and throw those bottles overboard. And if you were part of this program of putting these bottles overboard, you also had to collect bottles as you found them across the ocean. So they quite quickly started to, and then log where you had picked up that bottle with the note. So they started to map the currents, and they started to create this wealth of information that they never had about the conditions at sea. And all of this meant that instead of making these assumptions, is that they were able to reduce the time to cross the Atlantic from 3 to 4 months to 1 month. They were also able to halve the number of fatalities, improve conditions. He was accredited for building the shipping lanes that still exist between the two continents, and to lay the first telegram line down across the ocean. And I guess what I'm getting at is, if we pay attention and if we listen to what's available from a data perspective, is that we can make a difference in various parts of the world. And that's where the kind of idea for building a data-driven business came from. What we first started out to try and build was we knew we wanted to be in the data machine intelligence prediction sort of space. We weren't exactly sure what product we wanted to build, but we knew that the first product that we were going to build needed to have a very good and tight business model. So we needed to be able to take some data, show value, and show how that data was contributing positively so that we could, I guess, charge money for it quite quickly. And we wanted to be niche and we wanted to be focused. So we decided on, and I think he's going to be talking on Friday a little bit more about the technology that we're building and that we built. But we wanted to be pretty focused. So we decided to build a recommendation engine, and it was at the time when Netflix and Amazon were really leading the space academically and had implemented internally in their businesses, and you could see a lot of value out of it. And we wanted to offer that as a service. We weren't alone. There were a few companies doing it. And initially, we started out, and we thought that what we would do is we would talk to any company in South Africa and Africa, and that we think would have a good fit to this product. And typically, those would be large businesses. So any company, either in ecommerce, loyalty programs, brick and mortar.
So you're looking for transaction flow, large transaction flow that you could tap into where there was already something in process.
Yeah, it seemed as though, we're in this space that, well, you need to get someone to pay for it. And, the more data people have, the more complex the problem is, and therefore the solution, adds more value to them. But we just needed anyone with that has interactions between people and products. And a product could be absolutely anything. It could be a ticket to a concert, a song, a kettle, a car. It could be absolutely anything, and through various channels. So we built this, and we went out and we started talking to the companies, and there was a lot of interest, but we were pretty frustrated as a team of two, with the fairly long sort of sales, business development processes, and kind of being beholden a little bit to changes inside of the company. So you'd work for 6 to 9 months on closing a deal, and you get an email saying, we're just restructuring this part of the business, and we'll talk to you, a little bit later.
Was that something that you were driving as a pair? Did you kind of, when you took the story to them about what you wanted to do, was it something that you were saying like you're buying us or you're buying a product? What was your approach to kind of those early customers of saying like? What was the story you told them in terms of what you were building? Was it a product, a service, an expertise? Or?
I think it was a service. So we have a set of APIs, and it was a service. And what we would, I think that was another area, I guess, of frustration, is that we ended up, the larger the company, the more likely they are to ask you for some sort of customization. They can afford it. They can afford to pay you for it. But I guess you end up building you'd need to build a fairly significant sales support and professional services capacity on that business to kind of handle all the individual requests that people have. So it's not really, it's less of a product then and more of a service that can be customized and built out inside of
consulting ware.
Exactly, yeah. And and I think there's a very good business there. I think that it's just a different business. And it was a similar time, and one of the first companies we worked with was Mixit, and that was in the really, really early stages of our business. They launched their kind of digital store where you could pick up backgrounds and that sort of thing. And we started taking some of their data in, and we started working with that data and providing recommendations to them. And that was just through the API as a big customer. And that was we were really fortunate to work with that team, and we learned a lot about our back end and our technology in that process. But around about the same time that happened, we started, and I'm personally friends with a bunch of the guys at Woo Themes, and we started to, with a lot of interest, started to listen and to see the kind of exponential growth that they were going through on the WooCommerce product, and we spoke about it for a long time. It was at a point where we were just needing to get an investor on board. They had kind of indicated some interest in a software as a service business like ours, and at the same time we were talking to the 88 miles per hour guys, and we managed to secure some financing from 88 miles per hour and Woo Themes. And over the next few months, dissecting it with both the 88 miles guys and Woo Themes, we realized that what we wanted to do is we wanted to focus on building a product, something we could wrap, from a marketing perspective, we could wrap our energy around and branding around. And we had an incredible partner in Woo Themes to take that to market, and they already had in a way, a marketplace for us.
But it's quite a big change from the kind of 15 to 50 large companies, lots of data from a single source, to thousands and thousands of small, and even from a data modeling perspective, that's quite a different thing, isn't it? What was it? Do you feel like you? I don't know, it's a rude question. Do you feel like you followed where the money could come to focus on the company, or do you feel like the early experiences of the 9-month sales cycles meant that it drove you towards that kind of short, almost invisible sales cycle from you build it and they either come or they don't come through the relationship?
Yeah, I think we wanted to build a scalable company, and we were quite quickly, and coming from the consulting side of things, I quite quickly saw this, the other side of it turning into a business that, in order to scale kind of globally, which was an ultimate goal, we would need to be putting sales and support and professional services offices on the ground around the world, and it was a combination of that. When you say it's different, it is a different business, and that was a fairly significant pivot that we had to do. Fortunately, the way we had built the technology in the back end, which is really where most of the effort's gone into, could adapt quite quickly to support the small businesses, because at the heart of it, you're still dealing with these interactions between people and products.
How did the conversation go between you? Obviously, you're a small team. There's, as you said, there's two of you. Yeah. What's the conversation like that says we're going few customers, big inputs to thousands of customers, and supporting that kind of style? What was it a long conversation? Was it something that you quite quickly you were like, we've had enough of those 9 months?
No, it's an experience. It's a few months probably. To be like clear about it. It's and I think our investors played a big role in working with us through that. So it's we listened to what some of the customers were saying, and we measured up competition, and we went through the process of looking at it pretty thoroughly. But at the end of the day, it was a conversation sitting in our office as most things happen, and we were like, right, we've looked at the data, we've spoken to the stakeholders involved in this, and this is something that we're really excited about. There's a good business over there, but we're perhaps not as excited about that. And if we're going to do this, let's do something we're excited about and that we feel can scale.
And you've mentioned ATA, MPH already, and Woo Themes as being partners in the early days. Do you want to talk a bit about incubation and the ATA, MPH model? Was the investment pre-joining the incubator or post? Or because there's quite a lot, if you follow some of the online press, there's incubators of various styles and capabilities are popping up all over this country. I saw an interesting one the other day. I won't name them. But there's some very flaky accelerator type models sitting around us, and lots of smoke and mirrors. So just would you talk about the ATA MPH experience and how that shaped your how that added value, and how you've seen potentially what they do has changed since? Because I think you were involved in one of the earliest.
Yeah, we were in last year's program, which started in February, which was, I think, the second South African edition of ideate. And they've gone on, and they've done Kenya, and towards the end of last year they did Nigeria as well. 88 miles an hour has been in two contexts has been great for us. From an investor, Creston and Sylvia are top of their game. They really understand, really bright. They understand our business and add a lot of value to us. The program was great as well. We really enjoyed it. We were perhaps a little bit more advanced than some of the other products which were being brought in as kind of ideas that needed to be built out.
So timeline-wise, where were you at in terms of your journey that you've discussed so far? Where were you at when you started?
We had a product, so we were Mixit were using the product, and we were already seeing really good results there. At that point, what we were doing was putting feet in the ground and going to meet a whole lot of people. We were refining our message around communication, branding, etc. I think what I really like about incubators and accelerators is that if you look at, I guess it's on the VC side of things, and it does change things. But if you as an investor, whether it's angel, seed, if you want to invest in a company, there's no better way to go about making that decision than to spend time with that company. And so where a lot of investors will, if you get term sheet and then you perhaps go through a due diligence process which takes 3 to 6 months with lawyers and all sorts of things. That's one way of doing it, and I guess that's for a slightly more established business. But if you like an idea and you just want to see a little bit more, there's no better way to do that than to give a company $10,000, $20,000, bring them in, offer space, get their attention, their focus, and work with them every day for 3 months on finding out what it is that the product's about, but also who the people are. And I think that's why I really like the model. I think it worked well for us. We got to know our investors, and they got to know us, and I think that they helped a lot of the companies take the next step to refine their products and to get follow-on financing. So I think that 88 miles an hour have got and they're doing a good job of bringing in these kind of early stage companies and meeting the people and really getting to know the founders and the products and ideas that they're with.
So looking at yourself and then the companies that were with you in that process as well, do you feel like in terms of, I guess, put aside personalities of the individual founders, those that sort of flew from the nest and took off versus those that kind of flew out of the nest and hit the floor. Do you feel like the stage you were at with your product was a real advantage, or do you feel like the commitment that you were able to make afterwards or prior, what was the differentiator in terms of advising people who were maybe thinking about applying to an incubator or an accelerator? Like, where did you see the people that got the best result? Where were they when that process kicked off?
You know, a lot of the businesses, the startups that came out of 88 miles per hour who have done really, really well, have done really, really well because of some of the pivots that they made during the process of the incubation. And so Ikaya, 8-bit, you know, they're great companies and great guys. And, you know, through the process of talking with Creston and some of the other thought leaders that they brought in, they kind of made small pivots that really cemented or really allowed them to take the next level, you know, the next step. You know, we were perhaps a little bit more advanced, and in some ways that was it didn't benefit us because we already built a product, and you know, then we had to think about pivots, etc., etc. So we weren't pivoting at the idea phase; we were pivoting in the technology and you know, product phase.
You kind of laid the railroad, and you had to kind of follow some of that. Otherwise, you'd have to discard all the value that you.
It's just a bit more difficult to change. You know, when you've already built a whole lot of you know, you've built your product. So it was a little bit more difficult for us to do that, but we got the same value out of it, and you know, the great thing about 88 miles an hour is that they didn't treat everyone exactly the same. It wasn't some sort of you know, template that they took us through. So as I said, there were some guys who came in who just had an idea. Some guys had actually been, one of the companies had been, you know, going for 5 years. So yeah, we got out what we wanted to get out of it, and we continue to. I mean, they're an investor and they're a partner, and you know, they're continuously challenging us in terms of, you know, what we're doing and you know, what we're going to do next. So yeah. And so
let's talk about investment for a minute. Obviously, it is a subject that's quite different in South Africa from the international scene. Sometimes people read their articles on Pando or TechCrunch or whatever and set themselves an expectation, and then are thoroughly disappointed by the reality of the environment we live in. But how has it sort of benefited or shaped or held you back in terms of some of the mental overload of having that expectation, but then potentially the driver? How have you found it personally as having those?
Well, I as much as we read and you know, read the articles in TechCrunch and you know, the kind of dive into the startup and tech startup world, I have to be honest. I still am like totally confused half the time when it comes to funding and raising money. Seed and angel and Series A and 1 and 3 and you know,
shifts the definitions every 5
minutes. It's totally random to me, and I think it comes down to a company that needs some money and partners, more importantly, and going to go and find out, you know, a good fit at a reasonable price, and I think so at the right time as well. I think we've been really lucky. I think we really do have, you know, two of the best investors on board. I think it's really important to, and I know everyone says this, but I want to reiterate it, it's really important not to follow the money. I think there is money around, there is money available for ideas, but it's really important to partner with a company that can work with you to build your product out. And I think that we've done that, and we've, you know, we sit in the Woo Team's office at the Old Biscuit Mall, and work with the guys on a day-to-day basis, and we're really privileged to be in that position. And you know, we hope that we have a long relationship, you know, with our investors, and they add tremendous value to us. So no regrets. I think my only bit of advice, if I can give it, is, you know, just find an investor who has the same short-term, medium-term, and long-term incentives and agenda that you do as founders.
And so that's great advice, but how would you discover that in the terms of the conversation or the kind of reading of the websites of these people? What's the tactics that you use other than kind of being stuck headfirst into an incubator? How do you make that actionable from a understanding?
Talk about it, and I really mean talk about it. Like we had what maybe even we feel like were some hard conversations, which were, what do you want? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to invest in us? And investors asking other investors, why do you want to invest in Graphflow? And investors asking us, what do you guys want to get out of this in the next 5 years in the long term? And then spending time with them. So fortunately, we knew the guys at WooThemes personally, and spent 3 months with the guys at 88 miles per hour. And perhaps we hadn't spent that much time before with them, and we were probably a bit lucky there, I guess. But you got to take these leaps of faith sometimes, and just trust your instinct. Ask hard questions in a good way. Don't be a dick.
Exactly. Sort of bringing it towards taking questions in 5 or so minutes. But where would you find your day-to-day ongoing challenges with Graphflow in terms of, obviously, the small team, 2 of you, big goals, big dreams? Where are you? What's the day-to-day sort of product management, sales, business challenge that you find yourself facing today, and how do you sort of plan to take the company through those next few months?
Yeah, I mean, poignant sort of question, because we about to drop huge release today, 2.0.0, and
while sitting in this
it
room,
has changing pricing, and we are, today's a kind of big day, or the next week, should I say, is a big week. But we 2 people at the moment. We've had no intention of becoming PHP developers, but somewhere along the line, Nick's gone from Scala to PHP, made the transition.
So if he's looking hunched over and weary, then that's...
But we're 2 people. We're about 28 AWS instances. I only look after about 5 or 6 of those. Nick's wrangling the rest of them. And we do want to grow the team down the line. We still are in the phase. We're very fortunate. We're doing about 8 million events a month. So about 250, 300,000 a day. On a monthly basis, we're making our customers contributing about R1 million a month to their bottom lines. That's about 25% of their total revenue on average across all the stores. We've had 600 signups, and so I think we want to keep the team small, but we also realize that it can't be too small. We are starting to see more support coming through. We're spending more time on support. We have, we're focused and passionate about the product that we have out at the moment, the recommendations plugin, but we really want to. There are so many opportunities in the kind of crossover between machine intelligence and the online retail space, in the WooCommerce, WordPress side of things. So on a day-to-day basis, we're wrangling with Elasticsearch. We are wrangling with people people having custom themes that they're running their stores with, and plugin conflicts with our plugin. We have intentionally been pretty low on the acquisition side of the business for the last few months, because we're kind of changing the pricing and the business model. So we wanted to get some clarity around that, and then we're going to be going back into a kind of acquisition mode in the next few months. Head of HR, head of finance, head of marketing, head of cleaning the desks, head of, it's 2 people. It's You do, you know, there's nothing we don't do. Fortunately, you know, again, we've moved from, in changing this business model, we don't spend a lot of time in meetings anymore. We spend time talking to our customers, but not in meetings in Joburg and, you know, flying and various meetings around town, although always interested in, you know, staying in touch with the community, but not, you know, not trying to win business over face to face. So, you know, that has freed us up to think a bit more about like marketing the product rather than trying to get on the road and sell it.
So, from a sort of product management perspective, how are you changing the obviously you pivoted from big business to lots of small businesses, and now you're talking about changing prices again. How is that? Have you got a plan for how you roll those kind of things out? Because I know there's members of this room that have battled with pricing changes in the past and community revolt, etc. So are you getting plenty of advice from?
It's not what I want to hear today. We have the benefit of working, you know, with a team at WeThemes who really understand their customers and engage with them on a day-to-day basis at scale. You know, looking at I don't even know what the stats are. Anywhere between 600,000
somebody can ask him later.
To 1.2 million installs, depending on who you believe. But so, you know, we leverage that. You know, they give us a lot of feedback. You know, Mark's involved in a lot of our decision making, Mark and Magnus, and we don't quite know. We put together a lot of communication. We try and make the transition as easy as possible for our customers. At the end of the day, our intention is to provide the best product and support and updates to our customers. And if we can communicate that this is the way to do it, then I think that they'll be okay. And we can also we have a little bit of a cheat because we know exactly how much money we're making our customers every single month. So, you know, if we approach one of our customers to say, right, we made you, you know, we added $5,000 to your bottom line this month. Do you mind going from paying us nothing to paying us $49 a month? We think that there's a compelling argument for what we're doing.
That's the useful part of having a product which actually affects somebody's bottom line. It's,
there you go, yeah.
So the general advice is build a product that actually adds value to somebody's life and not just takes... Cool. Okay, let's open for questions. I think I've asked enough. I've broken the back of it. Jonathan, have you got the microphone? Stick your hand up if you want. Somebody will run to you. We have one over here for kicking off. And the one thing I forgot to mention is the only rule with asking questions is you have to actually ask a question, not make a statement and give your opinion and then at the end just say, do you agree? That's not a question, okay? So that's the only rule of questioning. You're changing your mind now. So just...
and you get a shot. Everyone who asks a question, surely.
Yeah. Yeah, if you ask a rogue question, you have to take a shot. They're not in it for the coffee.
Hi, I'm Peter. Early on in the conversation, you were talking about teaching your kids to code and like your own journey from computer science in school and then kind of moving away from it. So I've kind of got one question. It's kind of a segue into another one. Would like to have your views on computer literacy for people who are not hardcore techies. And then the segue is, what about sort of business literacy for hardcore techies?
Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that that's exactly what what we need. I think that the computer literacy has been really badly done at school and university. You know, teaching people to use Word and Excel is not computer literacy anymore. And so I think that there needs to be far. We had I was at a lecture last night on kind of mindfulness and people were talking about, oh, you should meditate once a day for 20 minutes, to be mindful. And there was a guy there who stopped us and said, why don't you just use every opportunity in the day just to be a bit more mindful about how you're doing things? And I think it's kind of the same. Like, do we need someone to go onto a specific course to learn about computer literacy, or should computer literacy find its way into everything that we do? And I think the latter is a better place. Whether you're a doctor or an astrophysicist or a firefighter, there's technology can enable what you're doing, so I think that it's incredibly important that we start at the youngest ages in incorporating that into education rather than treating it as a separate subject all the time. And I mean, anyone with kids here 2 or 3 years old will know that that's happening already, on iPads and the apps and things that are coming. But on the second side of things, I think that I always think it's important for hardcore techies to understand what the business is doing. But you'll be surprised how smart hardcore techies are and how much they do understand. And I find that this community is kind of, one of the most well-versed in business and startups because they read so much. But I think that there's always a bit of a balance. I think people should be allowed to focus on what they do, and I think we need to recognize technical skills in a company, not just leadership and management. I think there's no reason that the top developer in a business can't be paid and recognized just as much as the CEO or a manager. But I think that that's maybe the slant maybe on some of these degrees is don't try and teach people about some of the technical sides of business. Let them experience it, and so bring people in and bring your developers in and ask them, say, like, we're thinking of changing our pricing. What do you guys what do you think of that? What is the impact of that on us? And involve people in some of the thoughts, and I think it's great to have everyone understanding what the purpose of the business is and where it's headed. So I don't have a solution to it. I think that people should, and I think people should invest in. And now we have the freedom to, if I want to find out about discounted cash flows in a business, maybe the business is being valued and I have some share options in it, I can go onto Khan Academy and I can quickly read up about discounted cash flows and how they work. So we're at an incredible time where we can, if we want to know more about something, we can go and find out more about it. I think that's pretty powerful.
Great. There's one at the back there.
Look at everyone hiding behind the front row. Speak directly into the mic like this, not like this. It doesn't work.
Hello. Okay. Chongi. What I would like to know is when you got all your tidbits after collecting them all, and then you have this idea of starting a business, what challenges did you get for getting like the investors involved? Did you start on a garage with people that already had skills to start a business, or just idea to the investors? So I just want to check, like, to know what the challenges that you get when you started up or put in Kickstart or something.
Yeah, great question. I think the process of fundraising is not to be underestimated at all. I think what worked in our favor, in our benefit, was that we had a product, and so we had worked through that process of part-time work and late at night, and had taken then 9 to 10 months, stopped working, and kind of eating into our savings on a monthly basis, and just working full time in building that. And there's a bit more value in that, and so you can get a better price for when you do need to raise funds. But the biggest challenge that we faced was, I guess, the actual time that it takes to raise funding. Raising money. If you need money if you think you need money in, next week, it's the reality of it is it's very unlikely that it's available next week, and it can take 6 months of talking to investors, to going through any kind of due diligence or program that they have, to actually receive the money at the end of it. And that process of actually sitting down, putting proposals together, putting your 10-page slide deck together, going out, meeting people in Joburg, in Cape Town, hitting the road, that's not to be underestimated when you are 2 people. And you're trying to, at the same time, you're actually trying to build a product and maybe get some traction and support any customer that you might have at that point as well. And so it can take a hell of a lot of time, and it's quite a big distraction, raising money. So if you think you may need money in 6 months' time, you need to start thinking about it today. So that was the biggest challenge we did face. I think there's a perception that there is and actually I have no idea whether or not there's a lack of money, so to say, in the South African investment environment. I don't know what it's like overseas. I read about the same things that you guys read about, but I don't know. There certainly is money available in South Africa for investments, and I think that it's growing, and I think that we're starting to see some great success stories come out of these ecosystems. So yeah.
Cool. I think we've got time for 2 quick questions. We've got 3 hands, which is, you're going to have to make a judgment call. You're the mic holder. No pressure.
What a pity, I've got 2 questions. My name's Alan. I'm just interested in Graphflow's approach to IP protection, 1, and 2, where to next? I mean, do you see yourself applying the technology to non-e-commerce environments wherever people have to make a choice?
All right. IP. We, when setting up the company, we took a lot of advice on intellectual property. Intellectual property in software is even in the machine intelligence space, it's very difficult to prove intellectual property in software, firstly. And sorry, I'm talking about my experience and the advice I was given. Don't take my word for it. But we took the view that we are both South African. We are building the business from South Africa, and that we, although down the line, there would be great to have an opportunity to exit internationally, that we would cross that bridge and approach that when we came to it. In the budget speech last year, 2014, it was announced that international companies, if they wanted to buy a South African company, that they would be able to transfer that IP for free of charge. So we have intellectual property on our branding. We don't specifically have the plugin that we built is kind of available. It's licensed, but we don't specifically have any intellectual property on our software at the moment. The second part of the question, I think Alan, was around where to next outside of e-commerce. So at the moment we're actually powering, coming off the Mixit story, we are powering recommendations now for Story, the Story app. So that's I think a new release. If you have the new release, we're doing the recommendations at the end of a video on that. And we have a set of APIs, and we have the plugin which kind of acts as an interface between the WooCommerce stores and those APIs. But we do have customers who have directly interact with our APIs. That said, we are very focused and passionate about the e-commerce space and the WooCommerce space in particular as a niche. We see the opportunity to build out other intelligent products
into that environment. Given some of the constraints of some of the architecture there, we can add a lot of value to those stores. So that's our current focus, is to stay in that niche. And we kind of know the guys at Story pretty well, so it didn't take us a lot of work to do, and it's kind of a side project, if you like. It's not a core focus of ours, but we are seeing some really great results in it. So who knows?
Cool. Thank you.